Disruptors and curious minds, welcome to another episode of Thinking on Paper. My name is Jeremy. This is Mark. We
Hello.
have the awesome privilege to talk to the builders, the futurists, the people that are looking at the current systems of the world, trying to reinvent them to hopefully make the world a more connected, a more meaningful, a richer experience. I'm excited about today because I'm a bit of a rookie on this topic. And theoretically, I kind of understand things, but I've never actually engaged in DeFi, right? So I'm excited to talk about that. We're going to talk about financial systems in general. I think there's a lot going on in France, Mark. First of all, like, holy cow, what is happening over there right now?
well,
Aside from financial discussions.
well, we are privileged, yeah. First of all, to do what we do to interview the builders and the creators of the next iteration of the internet. Well, what's going on in France? They've just sacked the government, so they're going to replace it with another one, and it kind of relates to DeFi in that sense because Bitcoin, on the day that Bitcoin passes that kind of magical psychological $100,000 barrier, they want to put unrealized gains on crypto and stuff like that. So that's changed. But I love these moments of serendipity where we link the shows. The day that Bitcoin passes that, we get to talk about hyper complex financial tools. And for anybody who hasn't been paying attention, Bitcoin came from the ashes of hyper complex financial tools, did it not? So it's kind of come full circle. And personal opinion, having dabbled in DeFi over the last few years, it seems to be getting more and more complex. The financial tools on the blockchain become more and more complex. And I just wonder if history is beginning to repeat itself, where fewer and fewer people have access to these financial tools. And I think today's guest is going to put a stop to that and democratize them and make them accessible to everybody so we can all benefit from these new financial rails. And I'm excited about it.
That's it. That's a big thread here, Mark. That's really
Yes.
important, right?
Sorry.
Because yeah, well, the complexity of the traditional financial system, has it so in a certain sense, certain individuals are able to have access to things or create opportunity based on their understanding of something super complex, right? That maybe 1% of the world, 5%, 0.5% of the world might understand these mathematical systems, right? So here comes crypto, here comes DeFi. It's like, oh, it's decentralized, it's democratized, it's okay, everyone can kind of do this thing. And then it's like, wait a minute, this is pretty complex. Like, how, and layers of complexity keep adding and adding. So we're gonna get to the bottom of that, and I'm ready to do it.
Yeah, me too. Well, let's bring on our guest. And this is a first for Thinking on Paper. People will be expecting to see moving images, but instead we just have his avatar, which for reasons perhaps he will make clear for us. But today's guest is simply Kura, and he is the founder of Factify. And to quote from the Factify website, it is DeFi's composability layer. Effortlessly create, manage, and optimize on-chain financial strategies with cutting-edge tools. Welcome to the show, Kura. Happy to have you. Thank you.
Hey guys, and thank you for having me. Yeah, you had a wonderful discussion here, and you almost stole my pitch. It's exactly the type of reason why Factor came to be. This was the vision, and I'm happy to say that we're now bringing it to life.
Can I ask you just a question? Is my observation completely false, or is blockchain DeFi becoming more complex? I mean, a few years ago, even I could work out Uniswap. It's swap token for swap token. I want to move this here, have this instead of this. It's easy. And now there's a plethora of platforms that like perp dexes. I don't understand what's going on. Are they becoming more complicated, or is it just me who's becoming less sophisticated?
Not at all, and I think it's part of exactly the topic you mentioned. So yes, Uniswap, it was the beginning of DeFi, right? You just can now swap tokens from one to another. And DeFi has progressed immensely over the past 4 years into the point where basically the first layer was to somewhat imitate or duplicate what is currently available in traditional finance, right? It we had thousands of years of financial systems for a reason. We don't want to just swap tokens. We want to lend, we want to borrow, and we want to create more complex operations for a reason. They're not just complex, they're maybe complex to yourself and myself, but for the financial experts, those 1.5% that are the experts, they need those tools and they need those financial instruments in order to optimize your capital. So I fully agree. Like, we're getting to the point where DeFi is now has all these different tools that you can use, but it's kind of hard to understand, especially if you're not a financial or a blockchain expert. And again, you couldn't lift it better for Factor, because this is exactly why we created Factor. And I'll dive to it just in a bit. But yeah, I fully agree. Like, we're getting to the point where it is complex and we need to improve the experience as a user as a whole, but also for the creators. Just make it more simple. This is what we came to do, not just to decentralize.
I like that a lot. Why don't we start with some super basics of DeFi and maybe break it down to the foundational Lego blocks. Let's explain those Lego blocks and how they interact and how they can be used first. But first, before we do that, we are talking about financial stuff. This is not financial advice. Mark and I are not professionals. We're just curious dudes looking to unpack some knowledge here. So this is not financial advice, guys.
Also, Jeremy, do we have a sponsor this week?
Let's see. What would our sponsor be this week, Mark? What are you feeling?
If I had to choose a sponsor, for a relevant, poignant sponsor for this week's show, what would I choose? Gosh, something finance related. I'm not sure.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Sponsored to be revealed, but
piggy banks.
Oh, sponsored this episode sponsored by piggy banks.
There you go. Right.
All right, Corey, you're up. Let's break down DeFi. Give us the foundational building blocks, the Lego blocks. Let's try and explain them as simply as possible, and then let's figure out what can be done with them with what you're doing at Factor.
Wonderful. And you're using the exact same terms that we use. So first of all, we call them building blocks because you can combine them. They're just like money Legos. And I think this is one of the key things that is now different in DeFi other than in traditional finance. So let's start simple. So in financial operations, you can do various things, right? Even in the traditional markets, you can swap your assets. Maybe I have US dollars and I now want to have it as silver or as euros, right? I can swap it. I can get access to liquidity, someone that holds this capital, and he will provide this swap for me. This is what happens in a centralized realm. I think the first innovation that came in and basically launched DeFi into materialization was Uniswap, that solved exactly that. They created a way where this centralized approach of me giving you, the provider, some assets, and you go back into your piggy bank, today's sponsor, and they pull instead euros and they give it to me, right? This is the centralized approach. In decentralization, or in Uniswap and all these predecessors, basically you can now do it directly through a liquidity pool. So this is the first innovation that came to be. You now don't need this middleman or this centralized party to go and swap your assets. You just do it against a pool and not a counterparty. And this was the first innovation. And I think ever since, we only added more and more building blocks, as you mentioned. I think another one that is very fundamental is, of course, the money markets or lending markets. I now want to borrow or lend funds, right? Now you would need to go into your bank, and maybe if you want to borrow, they will offer you some pretty terrible yield, right? Because they are just a centralized approach and they can determine the fees. Same for the liquidity that you provide them. When you do a deposit, you essentially lend the bank money to go and do whatever they want with it. And this is another innovation that came to be. Now we have things like Aave and Compound, which are the biggest money market protocols, and they allow you to borrow and lend without intermediary. And this opened the stage to so many variety of options, from prep texts, which you mentioned, which are more synthetic by nature, to various yield optimization, which could be looked at as certain saving accounts or optimization, much like your pension. You give money to your pension fund, they go and use their traditional building blocks. They may be lended, they may be buy some treasury yields, and then they hopefully provide you yield. So this is exactly, yeah.
Yeah, this is a great start. Can we let's go back really quickly to the first building block that you talk about, this idea of liquidity pool, and you mentioned deposits, right? Because there's a language that people understand in finance, and there's a language that is kind of emerged in this crypto crypto market, right? And some of the language in the crypto market freaks out the people in the traditional market. But, correct me if I'm wrong. Let me throw this out there as I love just little thought experiment examples. So, say we have a thinking on paper token, right? And the three of us on this, on the screen here, we each hold a certain amount of that token, and we go to a platform and we stake that token on the platform, and that creates the liquidity pool to be able to do things with, like lend, like exchange. Am I on the right track or no?
So it very much varies within the protocol and the type of approach that we're looking at. So if we go back into this fundamental building block that is DEXs or decentralized exchange, this is a bit different than just go and deposit your specific token. So let's say we now have this token that we just made up, right? We want to swap it in a decentralized way. So it's not something or someone that holds a variety of tokens and will just pull up his put his hand in his pocket and give you the alternative of what you wanted to swap. Instead of it, there was a concept created called liquidity pools. And it's called pools for a reason. You can imagine it like a big swimming pool. And again, let's use easy terminology, euros and dollars, right? You just have this pool where anyone can contribute to the pool. You don't just put your own token, you put a pair. So I will now take, let's say $100 and the equivalent of 90 something euros, and I will combine them into a pair. This will create a pool. Anyone can contribute to that pool with whatever amount they want, and they make the pool larger or with more liquidity in the financial realm. Once that is done, we can now, anyone could then use Uniswap or any DEX to swap, because we have those two sides of the trade, right? So maybe you guys, you created the pool and you provided liquidity to it, to the pair. And I just want to now take my dollars and swap them to euros. So I now access the pool, I swap them. All of a sudden, I get euros instead of my dollars. And you, as the liquidity providers, you get a percentage of that fee as an incentive. You don't just provide your own liquidity and risk it for nothing, right? And I think this is exactly where the utilization of DeFi comes in. It brings the power back to the users, to the people, to the market participants, instead of the centralized exchange that do it all by themselves and, of course, make profit out of it, completely taking advantage over the players who are more, let's say, less savvy.
So if you have a pool, you have two tokens, euros and dollars. Okay, that they don't move too much in relation to each other. So is the risk of this coming when you have two assets which are very unstable compared to each other, where the prices might move? So at the moment you might have like pools full of meme coins and Ethereum or Solana or something like that. Is that where the risk one side, I guess, is other risks, but one of the risks is that they like move too far from each other, which dilutes the pool on one side or the other.
Beautiful. You touched on exactly the point of risk, basically, in liquidity pools. Again, we use the example where you are the liquidity providers. You created a pair or contributed to a pair, and I just want to swap. So I'm a different party here. But the risk that stays with you is exactly that. So if a pool or a pair is very popular, it has deep liquidity. So you can just imagine a very deep pool. There is less fluctuation, right? There is less fluctuation in the price when I want to go and swap it. I have less impact on the water level in the pool. But for you, you just touched on something that in our world, and this is unique to DeFi, it's called impairment loss. And this is exactly where maybe you now have Ethereum on one side and a very volatile meme coin on the other, and the price can vary. And when the price varies, also the amount of tokens in the pair changes, which can affect what you can then withdraw as the depositor. So this is exactly where the risk lays when you provide liquidity. And again, all of these things are requiring some financial knowledge or at least a basic understanding of how it works. As we know, there is no free money in the world. We created in DeFi much more accessible and decentralized access to these financial markets, but there is always risk involved, whether you're providing liquidity or in a more easy sense, borrow or lend some capital.
Can I play my stupid question card, Jeremy?
Oh, I've got a pile of stupid questions. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So my stupid question for this is this unique to crypto? Does what I understand you get dollars to euros, but is this massively lopsided potential of these pools or these deposits? Is there something equivalent to that in the traditional finance system in fiat?
No, it's very unique to crypto, again, just because of this inherent design of liquidity pools. So
Okay.
liquidity pools in dexes, specifically in decentralized exchanges, they are uniquely formalized in order to really allow something like that. Beforehand, before Uniswap, and again, I'm using it as a term because they were the first to make it, and it's really noble worthy in the sense of innovation, the simplicity of the operation, but all the possibilities it allows. Because you just, when you go to a centralized party, they just have their own bank of euros and their own bank of US dollars, and they take on the risk and the calculation by themselves, and they decide how much to charge you. In decentralized exchange, there is a very specific formula that automatically calculates it, because again, remember, you're not doing it against a counterparty. You're essentially throwing your dollars into the pool and picking up euros by yourself. So this creates something that inherently needs a unique formula and a unique technology in that sense to allow.
Okay.
Got it. So all right. So liquidity pools, I'm getting my head around that better. And the pairs and the strategy of a liquidity pool is probably in the pairs that you enter with, right? And back and forth. All right. So that's one block. Let's move on to the next one, Kura.
Exactly. So again, we can now dive deeper because now we have liquidity. We know we can swap them. I have my euro or my Ethereum, and I want to swap it into Arbitrum tokens or any meme coins. But now there's also a way where I can lend or borrow money, right? Maybe I now have my Ethereum or US dollars in traditional markets, and I want to borrow something else. So in our case, you would then go and provide collateral, very much like in traditional markets. I now can take my Ethereum, maybe I have $1,000 worth of Ethereum, and I can now go to a money market platform. Let's use Aave, which was the first innovator. And I want to just deposit my collateral there. For that deposit, I gain yield because I provided some sort of liquidity, right? Very much like the pair that we discussed. The other side of that trade would be to borrow. I can now borrow funds from that money market pool. So of course there is some limitations, and currently, by the way, in crypto, there is a very major one. You cannot do something that is called under-collateralized loans. So maybe when you take a mortgage, right, you provide the bank with $100,000, and you tell them, okay, bank, please give me $500,000 so I can buy the house. And worst case, I'll give you the house back.
Yeah.
In crypto, I mean, we don't know the other counterparty. So the trust is something that is inherently non-existent. So we only do something that is over collateralized. So if I provided $100 or $1,000 worth of Ethereum, there is, again, sort of formulas. Something more traditional would be around 60 to 70% borrow rate, which I can take back. So I can now borrow up to, let's say, $700 or 700 XYZ meme coin if the market provides. And with that, I can do anything that I want. And the reason is that if I'm over collateralizing, I don't need to know the other party. If they don't pay back until the funding rate or the loan terms end, I just take it from the collateral. And this is a key thing. Again, we can't do anything that is under collateralized, or I can't borrow $2,000 when I only provided 1,000, just because we don't know the other side of the trade. And this is key to anything in DeFi or in crypto as a whole. It's a trustless system, and it requires trustless solutions.
Do you ever, just on an aside to that, ever see a future using Soulbound tokens, ZK proofs, where you can under collateralize loans in crypto?
That's a beautiful question. I think there's already people trying to solve exactly these type of things. There are many different ways where we can approach it, from essentially on-chain credit scores. So you could then take the risk on yourselves, although you don't know the other party. So exactly with these type of ZK proofs or anything that is provided by on-chain data, I can estimate the ability or the willingness of the other party to provide the liquidity back, but I can never guarantee it. And this is exactly where it's starting to be similar to traditional finance. The bank gives you that loan because they just calculated an actuary risk score for you to pay back. Some of the people don't pay back. And even if the bank wants to sue them, they can do whatever they want. They just don't have that money to pay back. But that's a risk that the bank is taking on themselves. In crypto, it requires a lot of different stages and new tools to be created in order for us to create even this trust-based score or trust-based access, which you, as the other side of the party, can take on yourselves. But I think it's, again, very early in our development in order to get to something that is really trustworthy and battle tested.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
we're only 4 years into the making with DeFi as a whole.
Yeah, so you add, like Mark said, the zero knowledge proof, soulbound token kind of stuff that it kind of bumps up the trust factor just a touch, right? And as that trust factor goes up, the ratio is able to change, similar to me, getting a home equity line of credit on my house. The bank can come over and be like, "Oh yeah, that's his house. It's a house. I knocked on the walls. I got it estimated. We know what it is. I can take it if he messes up." Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but again, in crypto, and I think this is like the key element here. When I provide you the collateral, the 100,000 I provided to the bank as a first initial risk provision, and then I took the $7,000 that I got back, and I can take it anywhere I want. So in this case, you don't necessarily have a physical house you can knock out because it could be on a different platform, it could be on a different chain, it could be in a different world. So it's not that the bank or the other side of the party in this case can just go back and claim it if something goes wrong. So I think it will necessarily will stay in the realm of risk management. So how much I, as the lender, is willing to take a risk here if the money market is not over collateralized. If it is, no problem. It's smart contracts. This is exactly what we did. Nobody can avoid paying back if you have enough collateral to take. But if it's more than that, we will need to have these risk-based tools to estimate, and it will always be left as estimation of the ability of the creditor to then go and pay it back.
Optionality, Jeremy, this is why I would be terrible at it, because I would just take the loan and then you see some bright, shiny crypto that, oh yeah, that's going to go up. We're in the middle of a bull market. I'll go get some of that. That makes massive gains. I pay back the loan and I'm left with all the profit. Only I choose a really dodgy, bad coin and that doesn't work. But yeah, optionality gives investors more options. There's a lot more creativity. It sounds like you describe, yeah. The word creativity came to me, like financial creativity.
Exactly. I mean, this is exactly the type of where we get into more complex DeFi. You mentioned it, Mark, in the beginning of the conversation. This is the reason why we do want more tools and more building blocks in order for us to efficiently combine, again, assuming you have the knowledge on how to do it. And the other ones, the 99.9% of us who just want more yield on our capital, we have other tools to provide to them. And we'll get to it in a second when we'll talk about Factor.
So creativity and finance together, like, so let's
It's
bridge
a dangerous combination.
Let's bridge new world and old world, right? You know, traditional finance and crypto. And, you know, when people rooted in traditional finance, or even if they're not rooted in traditional finance, they're just people that have gotten loans before, that work with banks, that have watched, you know, the investigative super crime shows on TV. They hear creative finance, they're like, yo, so how important is language with all of this stuff, with increasing, with getting more people pulled in and experimenting and trying with it? How important is language when you talk about this stuff?
It's super important. I mean, we're onboarding people from what we call the real world into the edge of technology. And I think this is exactly the type of challenge that builders like myself are facing. We're trying to simplify these processes. So when we talk about financial creativity, so it is something that maybe is carried to the layman, but when we're looking at whoever is managing your pension, or a master graduate from Harvard that did his entire master's on financial instruments, these are just different tools. Or again, you touched it great, money Lego, where you can connect and optimize capital. So I fully agree. In the real world, it's scary because when you have centralized authorities, and we all are human, we have the tendency in our nature to go and find this extra edge and sometimes go into the gray and more darker areas in order to optimize it. With DeFi, these are contractually limited, or limited in the sense that I can just do whatever I want with the capital that is in hand. I can just go and do a different operation than the contract is saying. In the real world, we have contracts, but contracts are bound to courts and lawyers. We don't have these. We put them in code, and this is our court, and these are our lawyers. You do it according to these contracts, those smart contracts, and the creativity comes when you can combine these different contracts into a more massive emergent, in this term, capital instrument.
On your question of language, Jamie, I'm going to try this Christmas with some of my extended family and who are very much traditional finance people. And I'm trying to work on what language works to get them even the possibility of perhaps stepping their toes into DeFi. I mean, I guess the major challenge will be, from their eyes, perhaps, if it's not broken, why fix it? But then just because it's not broken, maybe it's not optimized, and maybe there's some way that you could play on that optimization of funds. I mean, everybody's a sucker for more money, and that's what it's about in the end. So maybe there's this language of DeFi itself is a it's like Web3, isn't it? It's a scary word. What does it mean? It's quite abstract.
So actually, Mark, I think you nailed it, and I think it's both. So first of all, DeFi allows you much more flexibility in nature because we're not taking the closed garden approach. And I can give you the example of, let's say you now take a loan from bank number one. They provided you with a certain rate where you need to pay it back. But all of a sudden they spike it, and you decide, okay, well, I want to take it to a different bank. This is quite the operation to do in a closed market type of thing. You need to ask for their permission, and this is a big word with our world, permissionless. You need to ask the bank permission in order to move it to another bank. In crypto or in DeFi in general, it's a one-click thing now. So you can refinance your loan in one click, and this is a very basic operation that is different from traditional world. And you also mentioned the world broken. Traditional finance is broken in exactly that sense, because I'll go back to humanity. We are all of us are humans, and when we give centralized authorities power, they tend to abuse it. That's just the nature of humanity. If you don't put limitations in place, if you don't supervise it. And unfortunately, it's true to technology, finance, or any other field. Many times the supervision, although democracies and in general, they try to supervise, we pay a lot of money to traditional banks and to traditional organizations, and they have many smart people who are trying to detour that. And many times they are smarter or have more resources than the people who are supposed to supervise them.
That's a really interesting point. And years ago, I read a book called "The Creature from Jekyll Island," which really, like, put my head in a spin, because it basically kind of debunked fiat currency, number one, right? Fiat currency, this is a shout out to our book club, is what our author Harari calls an intersubjective reality. Money is made up, and if we stop talking about it, it goes away. If we stop talking about the dollar, it goes away, right? But going back to this book, it also debunks kind of what the Fed Reserve is and who controls it and who influences it and all of that. And it's kind of like, man, there are things in place. While we can get loans and get access to certain things, there are things in place that lock us into really bad situations that are in favor of the centralized authority. And like you said, once we get in, we can't get out, right? So explain to someone
Rage Against the Machine, Jeremy.
I'm hearing it in the background. Am I landing on that the right way, Kura? Is that,
No, it's perfect. Again, you nailed it completely right. It's true to fiat, and I think this is the reason why Bitcoin emerged, right? It was the first, and we're not even talking about smart contracts. We're talking about programmatically insured money, where you, of course, it's not backed by anything but your belief or your use in it, but it's also true to the dollar. But the problem with the dollar or traditional currencies is that governments or centralized authorities can decide how to fluctuate it by creating inflation, by printing money, by all these monetary terms. In Bitcoin, it's all set in stone and nobody can access or change it. So you're just left with basically the value that you can then go and transact, instead of having it diluted by sort of a decision of that centralized authority. And then came all the other evolvements from Ethereum onwards that brought us DeFi in place, and now it's true to the entirety of the financial realm and not just the point of value or your currency. It's true to your loans, it's true to the yield that you want to provide. And these are fancy words for me wanting to get more capital on what I have. And now in these days, we have a very small group of people who knows how to do it, how to make money from money. And they take advantage of it, again, because of human nature. And in decentralized finance, we've built many different ways for it to be accessible to anyone while being permissionless.
So talk to us about Factor. What are you building? What have you built? What is the intention? Who are you seeking to help?
Beautiful. Yeah. So I think we touched on many different points here. And I think the key word here was those financial building blocks. So we have decentralized exchanges, we have money markets, and many other tools that let you play around with capital. Again, assuming you know what you're doing. The other side is those 99% of the people who just want more yield on their assets. I want to deposit and get more of it because I didn't dedicate my life to finance. And Factor came to solve exactly these two. So we built what is called the composability layer of DeFi. We allow tools for those experts, those 0.1 percenters, who know how to optimize yield. They know how to optimize financial instruments. They can come in a very simple drag and drop way, create and combine all these different building blocks or money Legos into a very complex, to their term, but they know what they're doing, an automation, a strategy that will optimize a certain asset. I now want to take my ETH, my Ethereum, and I maybe want to lend it and then borrow another asset. And with the asset that I borrowed, I maybe want to swap it to a different one and then provide it to another protocol that will provide me extra yield and harvest the rewards that I got from that and then swap it again. A lot of different operations, money Legos. And again, if it sounds complex, it is complex, but it's possible to people who know what they're doing. And I think the key thing with Factor, and if you want like a title for it, I like to call it like if BlackRock and Shopify had a decentralized child. So we built those tools for the
What a
experts,
thought.
right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. We built the tools for the experts. Now you can you can play around with these open tools and you can combine these money Legos because you know what you're doing.
So is the target for this tool set, is it like existing traditional financial advisors, planners, portfolio managers, that sort of thing?
They first of all, they need to come and onboard DeFi, of course, because in DeFi we already have them and it keeps scaling, right? We have more and more financial experts. They know DeFi, they know how to optimize yield. But now we need to we put BlackRock side in it. Where is Shopify? So let's use this example. So Mark, you're now the financial expert. You know how to play around with these money Legos and you can create the most amazing DeFi strategies, or basically again financial strategies as you want. We built a very
you don't know me.
for you. It's a hypothetical thing, but I think you can already improve and you're on the right way. So you create the most amazing strategies that know how to take assets and make more of them. And Jeremy, you don't know that. You're just a layman. You studied arts and you like to paint, but you saved some money, right? And you want to you want to take advantage of what in traditional finance only those centralized authorities make, right? They get our liquidity or our money and they make more of it while paying us peanuts. So in Factor, we gave the tools to Mark to build any of these DeFi strategy, and then they can deploy it as vaults. And vaults in DeFi, it means that anyone, for example, Jeremy and myself, can come in, deposit our assets into it, and in a permissionless way, just get access to the knowledge that Mark has. So Mark is managing the strategy. Jeremy and myself, we deposit into it, and we pay him fees, right? There are fees involved, but we will happily pay these fees because we're gaining more assets, we're getting yield. And this is exactly what Factor was formed. It was
So is
meant
this,
for, yeah, please.
sorry to interrupt, Cora. So this is essentially like a crypto-based mutual fund, like a vault is like a crypto-based mutual fund in a way, where Mark puts these collections of assets and strategies in place for we could bet on those essentially.
Exactly. So we spoke about building blocks or existing protocols. Right now, you have what is called yield optimization protocols. They created vaults, right? They are a protocol. Maybe they have some smart people there. They create different strategies. They might offer you 10, 20, 100 different strategies. And all of us in the DeFi market, we can come in, deposit our assets, and it will work for us. And what Factor is innovating with is we're creating it in a permissionless way. So there could be two parties. One is the expert who knows exactly what they're doing, but they can now, in a sense, permissionlessly sell their knowledge by creating a vault. And you and I, Jeremy, will just deposit into their vault. And we don't need to know them. We don't need to trust them. It's all permissionlessly managed. Mark here cannot just take the money that it was deposited and run away to vacation in Bermuda. It's all managed in the smart contracts. But if we're all succeeding, Mark's strategy is now getting good and providing a lot of yield. All of the different parties are enjoying it. You and I, Jeremy, yeah.
So Cora, just a quick question. I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. So while Mark can't, take the sack full of money and run to the Caribbean, couldn't he build that nefarious activity into the code?
Nope. Exactly. This is exactly the point. So when you create a protocol, you can put whichever code you want to put in. When we created Factor, we created those building blocks, those fact-checked, audited blocks where Mark can use and combine in any way they want. They can't just go and add a new protocol that never existed there, or maybe a new asset that is all of a sudden appears out of nothing and incorporate it within their strategy. But they take those existing blocks, which we whitelist and verify, and combine them in those efficient ways. So they can't move any of these assets to themselves. They cannot utilize nefarious protocols or assets within it, but it's very transparent to you as the depositor what is the strategy. And you just know that, okay, I now see the returns from that. It went up by 30% this year. It went up by 3,000% this year. I like Mark, or again, a number on the blockchain. And this is why I will deposit. And I can withdraw these funds in any time without necessarily having permission from Mark. And I think this is the critical part here.
That's where it gets really interesting, right? Because it goes back to trust, right? And
every episode goes back to
episode, trust, empathy, piggy banks. No. So I'm not just going to some kind of developer or developer/financial guy that's out there that's Mark. Mark maybe says, "Hey, Jeremy, I use Factor. I create strategies based on these verified building blocks that Factor has put together. Go check the building blocks out." And all I'm doing is creating combinations with those verified building blocks. Is that where we're headed with this?
Exactly. And again, Mark doesn't need to contact you. You can just go into Factor or anywhere else where Factor vaults were created. But let's use the Factor marketplace in a sense. It's full of user created or expert created vaults. They are, as you just said, audited and verified building blocks, which you can combine in various ways. It doesn't mean that Mark here, everything he touches turns to gold, right? A strategy could be bad, but it cannot be nefarious. Mark, as a bad actor, which is something that we take under account, we created a permissionless asset management platform, right? We come into the assumption that there could be bad actors creating strategies. And this is exactly the type of obstacles that we came in to solve, which we believe we did. So you come in, you see a list of various vaults created by various people. You don't know them, but you do know that they cannot use it in a bad way, in a bad way, in a nefarious way. Again,
how do you create transparency? How do you create transparency in the assets that are put into the collections of the vault? So if I want to go in and I want to see, all right, let me look at all these different protocols, right? How do I, it's probably difficult as a layman. If I understood code, I could probably dig in a little bit deeper. But how would a layman kind of go in there and be like, hey, I want to make sure this stuff is quasi legit?
Not at all. You don't need to dive into any code. It's right in front of you. The strategy is just displayed, and as Mark created it, so let's go back to Mark for a second. He connected different building blocks and money Legos. So he now lend X amount of Y token in a protocol. Then he takes a different asset back, and he created just an array of building blocks, right? He has now a tower of Legos. You see visually this tower. You see what assets are included. You see the amounts. You see the rates. You see everything by your own eyes. You don't need to dive into any code. You don't need to dive into anything. You just need to decide whether it fits you, your risk profile, whether it's maybe including something more complex like flash loan, which includes more risk layers, but maybe we'll touch on that later. Either way, you see it just in front of your eyes, and you decide whether you deposit or not. You don't need to trust the manager. You need to trust the strategy.
And that's based on, I guess, the code is law, and that's. I want to just change that. I realize we're probably running out of time, so I've got a big question. I'm going to try and ask a big question based on the Nexus, based on as we thread our shows together. We ask a guest to leave a question for the next guest, and so there's some kind of through thread for every episode. And I've got that Chain Reaction song in my head by Diana Ross, and I know that Chris in the chat probably knows that song, and everyone, it's now in your head. Chain Reaction, and things are happening so quickly, and I'm going to try and keep this all together. So our last question from last week's guest was, how do we think about financial education in the AI era? Should we be teaching kids about finance, about how to save, about how to spend, etc.? And I think since last week, connecting that, there's been an explosion of AI bots on Twitter. So you had the beginning of the agentic AI layer of the internet. You have bots programmed into the blockchain, taking decisions, making recommendations, giving advice, financial advice. There's an irony of DeFi that you still need off ramps into the traditional finance system, because you can't spend your money except on the blockchain. But perhaps, again, we're stepping towards this place where that will be possible, and you have these AI agents doing this on DeFi transactions on our behalf. Then you have online shops and online services where you can spend your crypto, so you don't need these off ramps. And can you bring that all together for me and ask you, Jeremy, how you think about this first, about how you're thinking about AI, crypto, finance? And obviously they are key pillars of whatever comes next. You need AI, you need some kind of financial layer to the internet. It makes sense that that's crypto. I mean, does it make sense to the government? Probably not. That's another debate. Yeah, how do you think about it all, having listened to what Kura has just said about DeFi for the last hour?
I think the interesting thing to me, the thing that jumps out is just the ability to move an intersubjective reality without friction across multiple domains, right? So you have each of these protocols, each of these coins, each of these financial instruments, whether it be the US dollar, whether it be the euro, whether it be Ethereum, those are they're essentially intersubjective realities. But now it's very complex to take one and make it do other things, right? But now I can see how technology might start to remove friction in a lot of these activities, but also hopefully maintain some trust levels in a way. Cora, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I love the question and I love the topic. I mean, I've been building some AI agents myself, specifically for our realm. In a more general comment, I think it's still too early for us to trust, quote unquote, those agents to perform something that is more than just answering our base questions or writing us a nice story, right? We are not in the stage in the AI technology where we trust the AI to provide us medical advice or to manage our funds. It's still not there because it's not yet verifiable in the sense that you're making sure it's not hallucinating some weird results, right? But this will change. We are very early both in crypto, but in AI as well. And I believe the more we progress, the more structures we put in within those large language models, we will start having much more creative ways where we can use it. So in Factor, for example, Factor, everything I told you, it's a programming language for DeFi. So our AI agent basically can then go and based on human language, you tell it, okay, I want to get the best lending rates on my Ethereum. And it will then go and check all the different market rates, and it will be able to deploy that specific action by itself. This is the first stage. What is getting more interesting is where it can automatically manage it, not just do the operation or the initial operation. And this is where it's starting to get scary, right? It's scary for DeFi as a whole, but also for humanity as a whole. What happens when it just makes the job better than us? Are we redundant? Are we just be able to utilize it in a best way? And I like to think that it's either we're going into dystopia or utopia. So dystopia would be to just keep it where the centralized AI companies, they keep the models to themselves and they can harvest data and those agents to themselves. My hope, and maybe I'm biased because I'm a crypto guy, but because we allow these decentralized infrastructure to emerge, if we have decentralized AI forms or decentralized tools to perform these actions, we are much more likely to go into a brighter future where we can take advantage while not being advantaged.
It's a great way to land the plane, Kura. Thank you very much. This discussion was great. I enjoyed it. I think I learned a lot more than I knew previously about DeFi, and it's really interesting. So shout out back to our original book club book, which is actually ironically titled the same book word that we're reading right now. So this was the Nexus. Julio Otino always talks about bridging, right? When you have some kind of new technology, you have to bridge it and root it in languages that people understand, processes that people understand, and kind of create a way forward. So I think what you're doing is a bit of that, and I think it's really cool. Another quick shout out to our sponsor this week, Piggy Banks. And Mark, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I love this conversation. I'd like to invite Kura on again, that we could speak about Bitcoin and maybe that kind of the off-ramp situation and how DeFi is almost kind of at the moment disconnected from where it needs to be useful to me and you and regular folk. But yeah, fantastic conversation. Thank you. Come to our book club, everybody. We're reading Nexus live tomorrow at the same time. We're reading chapter 3. It's about paper tigers and the written word, and how basically it was the start of information networks, the start of the building blocks, the Lego blocks of AI right back in the past. So come and join us.
We are the anti 15-minute book summary. We are the anti quick button to critical thinking and understanding. We activated ourselves. Come do it with us.
I forgot we have to ask Kura to leave a question for our next guest.
There you go.
Love it. Yeah. So first of all, yeah, I think it connects very well with Nexus and Yuval in general. So I think now that we see AI emerging, which will have a lot of different implications on all of our lives. I think this is the peak of technology. So I think my question would be, where are we heading in terms of the cross section between humanity and AI? Myself, I see it almost as a unified thing, and if we'll get to it at some point, I kind of believe we are AI ourselves. But it's exactly that. Like, where are we in 3 years in terms of this emergence between humanity and AI? I'm not even including crypto in it, but it's just very interesting to see how different people with different backgrounds can reimagine our place from this almost high level exponential growth that we're facing in technology right now.
We could do a whole hour on that question.
I was going to say, like, don't say the sentence, "We are AI," after an hour with Jeremy, because he will literally talk now for the next 5 hours if we let him about that. So
let's do that. We'll keep it offline.
All right, Kura, thanks so much. Hey, Disruptors and Curious Minds, thanks for joining us. We are here every week. We have book club every week, thinkingonpaper.xyz. You can find us. Thanks again to Piggy Banks. We really appreciate your support of the show. Hey, stay curious, be disruptive.
Keep thinking on paper. Bye-bye.